You are listening to a Freedom Student Ministry podcast.
All right, what are some of the shows that came up that you guys are your favorites?
Yeah.
Okay, listen up. Krista, what shows came up in your group?
Dragon Ball Z.
Oh, all right. Dragon Ball Z.
I'm watching anime.
I chose Big Mouth.
Big Mouth?
Yeah, that's what I chose.
Oh my god.
Shh. Okay, Krista's talking. Okay. What else? Peyton, what was a show that someone mentioned? Anything. I did hear Cops, so you can't say that. Do you remember any? Huh? Then tell me one. Goof? Okay. Over here.
Heartland. Yes. Brooklyn Nine-Nine. The 100.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah, and the cheesy ones.
Oh yeah. Dylan, you want to face me, bro? You're not going to be talking to your group the whole time. So, can you help maybe put your group in a way that works for everybody? Okay, so this month, the month of January, we've been talking about what? Relationships. And the first week, we talked about relationship with God, going back to the basics of loving God and being loved by Him. That was the first week. Something we talked about is what humans want out of relationships, and I asked you guys, and I also had a list. You guys said things like support, like someone to be like physically next to you, going through life, going through things, security, a deep knowing, like the person knows you deeply, someone to share experiences with, honesty, trust, unconditional love, and assurance that that love is going to be a real thing and last, you know what I'm saying? Satisfaction, things like that. And none of those we decided were bad things, but and they should be things that you get in a relationship and you give in a relationship. But if you're looking for those to be fully satisfied by another human, then you're going to be disappointed because God is the only one that can satisfy you in all those areas completely and first. And we need Him to be our satisfaction. We need Him to fulfill our deepest needs, God, because He's the only one that can. He is literally the only one that can fulfill your deepest wants and longings. That's who He is. He created you to need that from Him. And when we love God first and deepest, then we're ready for a healthy, good relationship with another human being. And I'm talking more about like boyfriend-girlfriend than marriage relationship is what I'm talking about. Can people get married who don't know Jesus? Yes. But the healthiest version, the best form of marriage, the best form of relationship is when both people know God. We're going to talk more about that tonight. Last week we had a panel of married people. Remember Jen was here, she's married to Tim. Remember Andre's here, he's married to Anya. And Jay and Wendy were here. And they answered questions that a lot of you asked. You'd written down on pieces of paper, and I tried to ask as many of them as I could. And the questions were like, when is the right time to pray for dating and marrying? How do you know when you love someone? And then this question was sort of asked, but wasn't asked that night, but was addressed, is it okay to have sex before marriage? And that question was addressed. And if you missed that week, or if you just want to hear it again, I'm going to put it on YouTube by the end of this week. And I'll post that on our Facebook and our Instagram so that you guys can see the link and click it and listen. So I just haven't done that yet. That's my bad. But you can listen to it soon. And you can listen to tonight's as well if you want to go back and listen to some things. So tonight, I want to talk about how to have the best relationship possible. I know you all want that. I know deep down inside of you, you're like, I want to have an amazing relationship with someone. And to do that, we're going to talk about two different kinds of relationships. Okay? Cool? We good? We all good? All right. So the first version of a relationship I want to look at tonight is what I would call the world's definition of relationship. And when I say world, I mean opposite of God's version of relationships, okay? And when I say world, I'm talking about a version that seems right in the moment, that maybe looks right or feels right, but doesn't necessarily mean that it is right but maybe it's just what the world is doing and something that looks appealing but isn't necessarily the best thing for us. And there's a verse in Proverbs. Everybody say Proverbs.
Proverbs.
Now I know why Jay has issues, because this isn't working very well. Okay. There is a way that seems right to a man or a woman, but its end is the way to death. So there is a way that seems right. That means like it might seem like dating this particular person is the right thing in the moment, but it's really not. It may seem like sleeping with that guy or that girl is the right thing in the moment, but it's really not. So there's a way that seems right to a man or a woman, but that way actually leads to death. And I'm in this instance, it's talking about real death, and it's also talking just about death inside where you're living on earth, but like you just don't feel like you're living right, or you feel like something's missing. So that's what that means. When we do something that seems right but is actually against what God wants for us, it's death inside of us. And then the way that seems right to a woman or a man is the way a mind without God thinks, or a mind that has God but isn't listening to God thinks. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So the way that's right to a man is often a fleshly thing. Check this out. Romans 8:5. For those who live according to the flesh, so we're in this case, or actually not in this case, all the time it means, according to the flesh means like according to sinful nature, not according to God. Those who live according to the flesh set their minds on the things of the flesh. So that's one way of doing things. But those who live according to the Spirit set their minds on the things of the Spirit. All right? So do you see the two opposing ways of doing things? Setting your mind on sin type things, setting your mind on God type things. So one of the world's versions of a relationship is a guy bouncing around from girlfriend to girlfriend to girlfriend, or a girl bouncing around from boyfriend to boyfriend to boyfriend. Maybe you've seen that. Maybe that's been you. They're looking for love and acceptance as they bounce around, but they can't find it in their current person, so they dump them and then they go out with someone else, trying to find it in that person, someone better. Maybe you've seen that before, maybe you've tried it, and that often happens because the person is searching for a love and a significance that they didn't get, sadly they didn't get maybe in their family when they're growing up. So they're trying to find it in a relationship. Or they're believing a lie that once they find that relationship, they're going to be satisfied and fulfilled beyond their wildest dreams, and it's going to make everything feel better. So they bounce around. Maybe you guys have seen that before. Does anybody recognize someone who's done that maybe, or you've been that person yourself? They're trying to find complete fulfillment in a relationship, and that is absolutely impossible. Completely impossible to find complete, full satisfaction in another human being. And you know what's a lie? That I really hate that the enemy lies this way, but there's a lie that you need a soulmate, that there's one soulmate out there for you. Maybe you feel like, maybe you've heard that before, but there's a lie that there's just that one person out there. When you find that one person, then your life is going to be complete. Do you remember Ice Age? He's like, she completes you. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
I was thinking about that today. But there is not one person out there for you that's going to complete you. There is only one who can complete you. That's God. Only one that can complete you. However, like, you know when somebody gets married and then their spouse dies and then they get remarried? Does that mean only one of them was their soulmate and then the other one's just kind of trash? Or just kind of second best? That's not what that means. It's possible to love another human being, and God, this is what happens. You're following Jesus, you're going hard after him, and then he brings along somebody else who's doing the same thing, and he causes you to see each other, to meet each other, and then you find out more stuff about each other, and you start to love that person, and then you get married. It's not like, oh, I found my soulmate, and, I don't know. Does that make sense? I'm not doing a very good job explaining it. But there isn't just that one person out there that's going to complete you. If you're following Jesus, God's going to bring you a person who's also following Jesus, and it's going to be coming along at the exact right time for you to meet that person. And when you're in the place that God wants you to be in a healthy marriage with that person. You know what else is a lie? Many teenagers think this. I was a teenager not too long ago. I know that teenagers are thinking this. But a lot of, unfortunately, people think that everyone else around them is having sex, and so that they need to as well. They also think that everyone else, since everyone else is doing that, if they're not, then they're not going to be accepted by their friends, and they're not going to be like included in a friend group. So they think that they feel bad because they're not doing that same thing. But that's not true. And if your friends aren't going to accept you because you're not sleeping around with people, go get some new friends. Like, that's not a good condition for friendship, okay? So it's not like everyone is doing that. And if you feel like everyone is, or you know everyone is, you're not in a bad place if you're not. You're actually in a great, healthy place if you're not. And I want to say this. If you have, God is not going to smite you and destroy you and send you to hell, all right? If you come to him with a repentant heart and you ask for forgiveness, he will forgive you. And he asks that you just move away from that and move on and not do that again. If you slip up again, ask for forgiveness and then move on from it. But if you keep doing it and you know that you're going to be forgiven after you do it, that's messed up, man. That's messed up. But if you turn to God and you're like, God, please help me turn away from this sin, he will help you. Another one of the world's versions of a relationship is essentially this. Correct me if I'm wrong, please. But I think I've seen it. You find someone who's attractive and you flirt with them and you get in a relationship with them, or then you start sleeping with them. Like, I just feel like this happens in the world. And then you get bored and you're not satisfied by them anymore. You're not happy anymore. So you dump them and you go find someone else and you start sleeping with them. And then you do that all over again. Maybe you've seen that before. It's so unhealthy. Do you guys recognize that, maybe, some of you? So it's so unhealthy because you're constantly giving yourself away to these people, and they're not going to be loyal to you and stay with you for the rest of the time. You know what I'm saying? They're just going to dump you, and they're going to go find somebody else, and you're going to end up in a world of heartbreak. And maybe you've seen that happen in your family or your friends, and you know that it's super heartbreaking and it's not worth it. But that's something that I see in the world. And a third version that I see in the world is, and I see this a lot with celebrities, because a lot of times their lives are like put on blast, but like they get in a relationship with someone and then they live together for years. They might have a kid or two, and then they break up and go find someone else to live with for years, maybe have another kid, but they never get married. Do you guys recognize that? Yeah, so that happens too. So I want you guys to talk in your groups. Why do you think some people just don't get married, but they like cohabitate, or they date for long years and just never get married? Would you talk about that? I want you guys to kind of brainstorm. Go. Okay. What'd you guys come up with? Tiger. Scared of commitment? Listen up.
And that dissatisfaction would be on.
Oh, they think that they wouldn't be satisfied anymore if they got married. Okay. Is that it?
He said that people might be afraid of commitment, like they want the flexibility to leave, and they feel like they're tied down if they're married. We've heard people say that. Also, like they've been hurt by marriage in the past, and so, or like been hurt by just other people that have been married, so they don't want to do it, or they're afraid of divorce.
Okay. What about you guys? What'd you come up with?
Commitment, divorce, hard to, or it's easier to get to break off.
Yeah. Not as many legal battles.
Right. Money.
So, what are some other versions of worldly relationships that you've seen displayed, either through celebrities, through the shows that you watch, through real life experiences? Share. Go ahead. Some of the real life, or some other versions of worldly relationships.
Specific relationships, like specific people, or just.
Well, just use that as an example. Like, what are some other versions of worldly relationships? So we talked about, real quick, we talked about 3. We talked about finding someone who looks attractive, and that's what you base everything on, and that's the person that you end up in a relationship with, sleeping together, all that kind of stuff. We talked about bouncing around from boyfriend to boyfriend or girlfriend to girlfriend. And then the third version is date for a really long time, live together, don't ever get married. So what are some other worldly versions of relationships that you guys see? Go. Your group. What are some other relationship examples that you talked about that are kind of unhealthy, maybe? Elijah, you want to share?
And talk.
Well, I know, but you listen to your group.
Somebody else besides me.
So maybe being married, but it's like super unhealthy and kind of toxic. Okay. Rachel's group? Arranged.
And Isaac brought up dating apps, and like you're just it looks like you're just swiping if it look attractive to you, and then that's all
Yeah.
that meeting that like that's
Get
all
me
you
started on
go
dating
into it,
apps.
and all you know is
Don't
like
get me started! online apps, eHarmony. Christian Mingle. Anyway, this group, what do you get? Okay, Krista.
Was they greedy?
Greedy? Okay.
Like they only do it for the money?
Oh, yeah, like celebrity marriages or something.
Yeah, or
Like
someone that's
Gold digger.
yeah.
Okay.
And then for popularity.
Popularity? Want to expand on that?
Mhm.
So, share some more. What does that mean?
That means, let's say, like say for you, you're in high school.
Super popular.
Let's say you're in high school and there's some girls, and you see that they're all popular, and you go up to them and say hi, but they don't even care about you. So you think of a way for them to like you so you can get popular, and you don't realize the consequences.
Okay, so maybe I start dating someone just because I want to be seen as cool in their eyes.
Yeah.
And it's not really a great relationship. Okay, so say that again.
Like dating someone who's already popular, so that like their friend will notice you because they're probably popular kids.
Okay. Yeah. So choosing who you date based on their popularity.
Yeah.
Okay, so those are different worldly examples for sure. And remember, when we say worldly, we just mean like opposite of what God would have for us, you know? And if you have found yourself in a relationship like that before, you're not a bad person, okay? Just like move on from that and be like, okay, God, what do you have for me now? What do you have for me that's healthy now? And that's cool to do, to move on from it like that. Of the TV shows that you guys shared earlier, I want you to think about the relationships on those TV shows. And I want you to think about, are they healthy? Are they portrayed as healthy? Or are they portrayed as like worldly and kind of messed up? So share that with your groups. All right, so we don't need to share about that. I already know the answers to some of them just based on some of those TV shows. There's just a lot of shows do not portray healthy relationships. A lot of times they portray unhealthy relationships because of the drama. It keeps people like interested, like what's going to happen next week. Do you have something you want to share?
Yeah, so then sure it is.
Okay, go ahead,
I
Eli.
only know one healthy relationship in the cartoon. Cosmo and Wanda.
Two little fairies and.
In what?
Very odd parents.
It's in a cartoon.
Oh, I've never watched it.
I always think
Oh,
relationship.
Sorry, Jackie. Jackie's like, we can't be friends.
It's a good relationship.
Okay, so now that we've looked at the world's version of relationships, now that we've looked at what the world sees and does as relationships, I want to look at God's version, which is more appropriately God's way for marriage. And first of all, to have a truly healthy relationship of any kind, Jesus needs to be a part of it. The healthiest relationships you've ever seen, like in this church, are because Jesus is a part of those relationships. And when I'm talking about you being in a relationship with Jesus, I'm not just talking about go to church on Sunday or go to church on Wednesday, kind of believe in God and then go do whatever you want throughout the week. I'm talking about a real relationship with Jesus that you are communicating with Him and you're in a relationship with Him. And if you don't know what that looks like and you want to know, we leaders would love to help you discover what that looks like in your life. So that's the first thing. To have healthy, great relationships, Jesus really needs to be a part of those. He created us for relationship with each other, but most importantly, relationship with Him. Second of all, Once you have a relationship with Jesus, you're a Christian. And as Christians, our whole lives are made to be lived with God and for God. He created us for that. Colossians is a book in the Bible, and chapter 3 says, if then you have been raised with Christ, so you've come into relationship with Him, you've been baptized into faith, seek the things that are above, where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on things that are above, not on things that are on the earth. That's like the other two verses that I shared with you earlier. Remember, there's two different things. When you live according to the flesh, so this is thinking about things of the earth. This is thinking about things of the world. When you live according to the Spirit, that's thinking of things of Christ, thinking of things above. That just means like Christ is seated at the right hand of God. So thinking about things that pertain to God and to what Jesus would have for us. So since our lives were made for that, since all of you guys and myself were created to live for and with God, doesn't it make sense that our relationships, especially our marriage relationship, the one that's the closest with another human being, is made to be lived with God and for God? So here's the first part of God's way for marriage. Okay, God created marriage as a partnership for one man and one woman, and this is how we know. Adam and Eve are the first examples of this, right? So God creates Adam. Adam is alone. God creates all these animals. And He's like, hey, Adam, name these animals. Adam's naming them, and he discovers, oh, there's a male and a female version of each animal. When he's done naming them, he's like, wait, there's no one for me. So a verse in the Bible even says, but for Adam, there was not found a helper suitable for him. There wasn't a partner for him. And so while he was sleeping, I know you've heard this story before, but it's a great story. God literally takes a rib out of Adam's side, and He makes a woman using that as the base, the rib. God didn't take a bone out of his head or a bone out of his foot. He didn't take a bone out of Adam's head so that Eve would be smarter than him or stand above him. He didn't take a bone out of Adam's foot so that Eve would be a harder worker than him. He took it out of Adam's ribs so that they're equal. God created them so they would work together, right? And so that Adam would be next to her, protecting her. And he took a rib to make this woman. It's amazing. God is so creative. So He had them together, working together to share God with each other, to make each other more like God, to honor Him. It's a beautiful picture of what God created. So I want you to talk in your group, just brainstorm, why is that kind of marriage a good thing? Why can you potentially see that kind of a marriage, one that was fashioned by God, so made by God, and one that's on equal footing, where the man and woman are working together, why is that a good thing? Share it. So, we're not going to share those, just wanted y'all to work it out in your workshops there. So since God created marriage for a man and a woman, doesn't it make sense, stick with me here, that He created sex just to only exist within marriage? Since God created man and woman to be together in marriage, doesn't it make sense that He only did? He only created it for that. It's a private thing between a husband and wife, and it's not something to go share with other people, because God gave it to you as a gift for marriage. When we go around giving it out to other people, we're giving parts of ourselves away that we can't get back, because pretty soon we're not going to be with those people anymore, because we're not in any sort of covenant relationship with them. We're not committing to be with each other. So it's just like one time pleasure thing, and then you're done. Wouldn't you rather be, I know this is the truth, I know deep down inside all of us, we want to be with someone who is going to be committed to us for life and is going to stand by us, and that's going to give us the security of having someone with us, and that's going to point us ultimately to Jesus. That is the best way. The other way can happen, and it does happen all the time. It doesn't mean it's the best way. Remember, there's a way that seems right to a man, but its end is death. There's a way that is right to God, and that is life. It's best. It's health. One of the reasons why God created marriage was to make us more like Him. For example, who's selfish here? I got my hand raised. We can be so selfish, and in a marriage relationship, you all of a sudden have to be thinking about another person, and oftentimes you don't, because you're selfish. So if you screw up and you think of yourself, you don't think of your partner, and they call you on it, but then they forgive you because they're following Jesus, then you're going to see Jesus in them, and you're going to be like, oh, God, and then you're going to remember the forgiveness God gave you, and that draws you closer to Jesus. It points you more towards Jesus. So that's just one example of the many ways that being in a marriage relationship sharpens you and makes you more like God and helps you to honor God. And I may have shared this before with you guys. I don't remember. But I've heard a relationship described like this. The closer a husband gets to God, the closer he gets to his wife. The closer a wife gets to God, the closer she gets to her husband. So as they pursue God and they get to know God's love more, they get closer to each other. Do you see how that works? And that is the way that God designed it. So if you want the deepest, most intimate, amazing relationship you can have, this is the formula to do that. Know God, pursue Him. God brings along a person who's also pursuing Him, who is right for you, and He brings that person along in the right time. And you get married, and your relationship deepens and becomes the healthiest, best thing that can happen. Now, is there a lot of hurt and heartache in relationships? Do Christian marriages sometimes end in divorce? Unfortunately, yes. But if you are pursuing Jesus with your whole heart, and you marry someone who's doing the same, and you're constantly trying to be more and more like Jesus to each other, you're going to work things out. You're going to make things happen. I feel badly for you guys in this generation because TV is so accessible. Netflix is on your phone. Social media is so accessible. Movies are so accessible. So you can constantly watch things that show unhealthy relationships. And pretty soon, we just start to believe that that's the way relationships should be. And we start to believe the lie that you need a relationship in order to feel good about yourself and in order to be fulfilled. And that's just what it is. It's a lie. That's not true. God didn't create relationships so that you could be fulfilled by the other person completely. Nobody can do that. You know what I'm saying? So I feel bad for you guys, for my generation, because we just have so much accessible to us, and we can get all these bad examples. But I encourage you, when you're here on Sunday mornings, go hang out with Wendy or Jay or Tim or Jen or couples that are really following Jesus, and ask them questions or just watch them, just observe and see how they interact and see healthy relationships at work, because they're really powerful and they're great examples for us. For me too, because obviously I'm not married yet. There's no ring here. So I also feel hopeful for you guys, because I really believe that through Jesus, you guys can be strong and not conform to the patterns of this world. And you guys can have strong marriage relationships that are in Christ, that are examples to your peers and to the generations to come after you. I believe that's possible for you guys. I totally do. It's your choice, but it can be possible. And my prayer for you guys, something that I think about a lot for you guys and pray about, is that you'd begin to look more deeply at God's best for you. What does God have for you? Because it's better than what you have for yourself. I promise you that. God's way is always the best way. And for years, I've been standing right here, sharing that with this youth group, that I've noticed in my own life, I have proof in my own life, that God's best is better than anything I could come up with. Do you know what I'm saying? I have proof in my life. I could tell you stories about how I tried to do something and it wasn't that great compared to what God had for me later if I had only just waited for Him. So I just encourage you guys, wait on the Lord for the right person, okay? Wait on the Lord. And if you are sitting there going, I'm waiting for a long time, that's an opportunity for you to work on yourself and to become the person that another person would want to marry. You know what I'm saying? So when you're 15, 16, work on your relationship with Jesus, right? Because He's good and He loves you, and you're not ready to get married anyway, legally or illegally. So that's my spiel. God's best is always the best. Trust Him on that. Trust Him when He says that. Trust me when I say that. His way is always the best.
You have been listening to a Freedom Student Ministry podcast.